Well, then I'll allow the openings for this appeal. As I stated, I've already gone over the statement of claim, the relief, and the witnesses, the witness list, and Mr. Chavez, and of course the police report along with that evidence. So,
Y'all vengeance.
if Mr. Shaw, you would like to start with your opening for this appeal, sir?
Wait,
you may.
Wait, what?
Yes, I'm going to allow Mr. Shaw to give his opening right now.
All right, can you guys see me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see you.
Thank God.
Go
Sure.
ahead, Mr. Shaw.
All right. So, Your Honor, want to go ahead and say thank you for taking the time out of your day to hear this appeal. So we're here today because my client, Nino Chavez, was given an infraction that the police believed gave them reason to search my client's vehicle. Unfortunately for the police, failing to yield to an emergency vehicle is not reason to search said vehicle, and as such, the vehicle should have never been touched. Furthermore, within this case, you will notice a severe lack of physical evidence in terms of anything found within the vehicle to be presented here in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeLaw.
Yeah, Shaw.
Or a representative from the DA's office. You may proceed.
Okie dokie. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the court in the gallery, I would like to start by thanking you all for hearing this appeal and allowing Mr. Chavez the ability to exercise his right as a citizen of Los Santos. Tonight, Mr. Shaw is going to do his best to attempt to convince the judge that Mr. Chavez's vehicle was unlawfully searched. However, I will be doing my best as an ADA to prove to Chief Justice Labar that both Deputy Winchester and Senior Deputy Shepard were well within their rights as law enforcement officers of Los Santos in conducting the search of Mr. Chavez's vehicle, and as well as proving that any facts during this case, as well as proving that all facts during this case will lead to the legitimate search of said vehicle as well. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you very much.
He's very eloquent. Wait, how do you do the emoji?
Okay, Mr. DeLaw. You may call your first witness, sir.
Your Honor, Your Honor, I would like to call up Deputy Winchester, please.
All right, Deputy Winchester, will you please approach?
Yes, Your Honor.
Coop, do you want to swear him in or you want me to?
I got you.
Oh,
thank you.
But I got you, though.
We have officers in the gallery, Your Honor. If you
That's all
want to use
right.
them.
Coop can,
Yeah.
Coop can do it. He's got this.
I'm sorry. What's your name, sir?
Deputy Lionel Winchester, Blaine County Sheriff's Office.
Deputy Lionel Winchester. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you, Mitch?
I do.
Praise Mitch.
Raise Mitch.
Your Honor, let the record state and show that this witness has been sworn in.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Just for the record, when someone says praise Mitch in this courtroom, everybody out there better say praise, Mitch.
Oh,
Praise Mitch.
Praise Mitch.
Thank you.
Praise
Your
Mitch.
Honor.
All right, Mr. DeLaw, you may proceed with your line of questioning
Sir.
for Deputy Winchester.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, how are you?
I am doing okay.
Oh, that's good to hear. Could you please tell us, to the best of your recollection, what happened on the night of July 3rd, 2019?
Yes, sir. We received a call about a shots fired in a mountainous area. Myself and Colt Shepard responded, and we arrived on an incline of a dirt road. As we approached the incline, we could see two vehicles and two people standing about where the caller had identified hearing the shots fired from. As we approached, we could see a dead murder kitty on the side of the road. We made scene, and Mr. Nino Chavez approached and acknowledged that they had fired a firearm in defense, killing the murder kitty. For the report, we needed to identify, since a firearm was shot, that they had a valid weapons license, and to verify who was involved. Nino Chavez identified and had a valid weapons license. There was also another individual on scene, later identified as Al Seb, who at first refused to identify, but eventually was identified through investigative means. It was then acknowledged that Mr. Sab had an active warrant for his arrest. When we tried to detain the subject to place him under arrest for his warrant, he fled on foot, ran to his vehicle, started the engine, and drove up the hill along the dirt path. Myself and Deputy Shepard pursued with our lights and sirens flashing. When he got near the top of the dirt path, he turned around and came back down the hill.
Yeah, thank you, Darkin.
Mr. Chavez, by that time, was in his vehicle. Mr. Sav's vehicle drove past Mr. Chavez's vehicle, and Mr. Chavez's vehicle immediately then cut sideways across the dirt path into our pathway, causing my vehicle to collide with his vehicle with such force that my vehicle was thrown slightly off the cliff, stopping on an incline approximately 15 to 20 feet off the roadway and disabled. Then it exited my vehicle and placed Mr. Chavez under arrest for obstruction of justice, which I identified to him. We then searched his vehicle as it was part of the crime of obstruction, as it was to be impounded and seized by the police department. After we had completed searching the vehicle and we were about to transport, Mr. Chavez was orally assaulted by that same murder kitty that he had shot previously. After the fact, he was then transported to Pillbox Medical via ambulance, and I stayed behind to wait for a tow operator to tow his vehicle to police impound.
All right. What time of day was it?
It was nighttime.
Okay. Are the lights of a police vehicle more visible at night rather than day?
Yes, the sun typically tends to drown out the lightness a little bit more, so they are quite more visible at night.
Did you have your sirens going?
I did.
Okay. Is obstruction of justice a felony?
It is.
Okay. If somebody is being placed under arrest for a felony, do you search their vehicle?
If the vehicle was used in conjunction with or in commission of the crime.
And okay. What did you find inside Mr. Chavez's vehicle?
We found a small baggie of cocaine.
Okay.
Huh.
Sorry, all right, 1 second.
Take your time.
When did you and Deputy Shepard decide to lower the charge from obstruction of justice to failure to yield?
Mr. Chavez, while being placed under arrest, had requested legal counsel, but none was available. And while he was in the hospital, I believe he requested to be transferred to Bolingbrook Penitentiary in the ICU ward. And due to his criminal history or lack thereof and his standing within the community, we decided to lower the charge to failure to yield to emergency vehicle.
Okay. What did you do with the baggie of cocaine that you seized out of his car?
It was seized and placed into an evidence locker where it was documented and then placed for destruction and logged for destruction.
All right.
Uh-oh, not looking good for Nino, boys.
No more questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeLaw. Mr. Shaw,
Absolutely.
any questions for Deputy Winchester?
Yes.
Thank you. You may proceed, sir.
Mr. Winchester, is it typical for evidence to be placed and logged for, I believe you said destruction, while the charge itself is still able to be appealed?
Well, typically drugs are placed in for destruction. That's typical behavior of our police department.
Okay. Is it typical when finding physical evidence within a location to take pictures of it?
Typically, yes, sir.
Did you take pictures of anything found within the trunk of Mr. Chavez's vehicle?
I did not have an operational camera that day, sir, no.
How was Mr. Chavez's demeanor at the time that you arrived at the shots fired call?
Cooperative?
Was he aggressive in any way?
No, sir. And like I said, he was cooperative.
Did Mr. Chavez give you consent to search his vehicle?
No, sir.
Did you arrest Mr. Chavez and charge him with anything that would result in him going to jail for anything aside from possession of cocaine?
I had detained him for no, excuse me, I'm just coming off a 12-hour shift here. I had detained him for obstruction of justice, which is considered a felony offense in the state.
So, just to verify, he was detained. Was he under arrest? Sorry, I'd like clarification on that.
He was initially placed under arrest here. Yes, sir.
Initially placed
That's
under
what we
arrest.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, is it typical to start a situation in which you are arresting someone and then afterwards decide to switch that to a lesser charge that would essentially remove your ability to do what you had done before? So specifically in this case, what I'm referring to is the searching of a vehicle only being allowed because you decided to arrest him, as you state, but then go back on that and change it to an infraction versus a, I believe, felony you had stated earlier?
Well, yes, sir. It was a special circumstance considering that he had requested a lawyer, but no legal representation could be identified or could be located for him, and he was in the hospital. So, considering his standing within the community and his lack of legal representation and the fact that he had requested to be transferred to Bolingbrook ICU, we went ahead and lowered the charge down to failure to yield.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and reference the police report at hand here, where it states, Mr. Chavez got out of the vehicle and was placed under arrest by Deputy Winchester and searched. Of note, Mr. Chavez was found to be in possession of cocaine. Is that something that you had wrote, Mr. Winchester?
No, sir.
Who wrote this?
It was going to be Deputy Shepard, sir.
Okay. Further, it states Deputy Winchester seized the baggie and placed it in the evidence locker for possible further lab testing. Was it placed in the locker for possible further lab testing, or was it placed in the locker for destruction?
I mean, it's whatever it gets dealt with after that. I put it in the locker. They typically are destroyed after a certain period of time. That period of time is unknown to me, sir.
Okay. At any point in time during your encounter with Mr. Chavez, did he indicate that he was in any way, shape, or form willing to help the individual who was attempting to flee from you guys?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, sir?
At any point in time during your encounter with Mr. Chavez, did he indicate or imply that he was going to help the individual who had fled from you?
How do you mean, sir? I'm not following.
Did he do anything in any way, shape, or form that would make you assume that he was going to help the individual who was fleeing from you prior to you guys actually? Yep, correct.
So you want me to? I'm just trying to clarify here. You want me to explain if he tried to help before he tried to help? Is that what you're asking me?
No. What I'm asking is, okay, let me take a few steps back. I apologize. I'll withdraw those questions. As soon as the police chase started with Mr. Saab, did you see Mr. Chavez get into his vehicle and attempt to follow the direction you guys were traveling in?
He did not follow. No, he remained on at that original scene.
Okay. Did Mr. Chavez have a radio on his person?
I don't recall.
Did Mr. Saab have a radio on his person?
I honestly don't recall, sir.
So, I'm just trying to understand this, because I believe what you're going for is that the original charge was obstruction of justice, and
Yes, sir.
that would result, or that would require that Mr. Chavez intentionally interfere with the chase at hand. But if he didn't know that you guys were coming back in his direction, you really think it was intentional?
Your Honor,
couldn't tell you what
speculation.
his-
Objection, speculation.
Mr. Shaw, do you have a rebuttal to that objection?
No.
You're withdrawing the question?
I'll withdraw the question.
All right, sustained.
As you chased the individual up the mountainous area, I believe as you described, what position was Mr. Chavez's vehicle in at the time?
He was on the shoulder of opposing traffic.
What? It was a dirt road.
Shoulder of opposing traffic.
Correct. So if we were to say the chase had initially gone north and turned around and head back south towards him, he was facing north on the west side. That's not the exact heading direction, but just got to give an orientation the best I can verbally.
Understood. And could you describe the area in which this took place? Because obviously it wasn't a clearly paved road, correct?
Correct. It was a dirt hill, a long, straight dirt road on a hill, on an incline. I'd probably say approximately a 35 degree angle. And no street lighting.
Gotcha. And was there sort of a crest at the top of the hill that would prevent Mr. Chavez from being able to see you guys?
There was a at the very top, it turned to the left, in which he would not have been able to see us. We made it briefly around the corner, but then the chase turned around and came back towards him. I'd approximate maybe 250, 300 yards.
Understood. And how fast were you guys traveling?
Right there.
I do not recall, sir. Would you like an estimate?
If possible.
I'd say between 50 to 70 miles an hour.
No further questions.
Mr. Law, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed, sir.
Deputy Winchester, did you search the vehicle before or after he was placed under arrest?
After he was placed under arrest.
Okay. You said it was nighttime, so if it's nighttime and there are no street lights, like you said earlier, is it easier to see? Should it have been easier to see the lights
Objection,
coming
Your
from
Honor.
the?
Scope.
You brought up it. You literally brought up the area which it was in. And then he said himself that there was no lights.
I'll withdraw that objection.
All right.
Kermit's good.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Kermit's good, man.
Yeah. So you said that there was no light, no street lights, and that it was dark at night. So it should it have been easier for him to see the police lights?
Typically, yes, sir.
All right. Me personally, I have no more questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. DeLaw.
I have a question, Your Honor.
All right. You may proceed, Miss West.
Okay. This is about the vehicle itself. Is it standard procedure to search a vehicle before impounding it?
If the police department is going to take seizure and impound it in a police lot, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and were you going to impound it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
All right. You may step down, Deputy Winchester.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Just be advised that Mr. Shaw may call you as a witness for his side, sir. You are listed as a witness for him.
Yes, sir.
Mr. DeLaw, do you have any
Yes.
more witnesses you'd like to call?
Senior Deputy Shepard, Your Honor.
All right. Senior Deputy Shepard, would you please approach? Coop, could you swear in the witness, please? Thank you.
Senior Deputy Colt Shepard, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you, Mitch?
I do.
Praise Mitch.
Praise Mitch.
Praise him.
Praise Mitch.
Praise Mitch.
He's sworn in, Your Honor.
Do it. I double dog dare
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Still an
You may
atheist.
proceed, Mr. DeLaw.
Okay. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you, Mr. Danlaw? Good to see you.
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. From your
I don't remember that.
from
I
your
can't
point of
use
view,
it in
could you please
RP.
tell us what happened on the night in question?
Sure. I was second on scene to arrive to reports of shots fired up in the Wilderland off of Palomino Highway. We encountered Mr. Chavez speaking with a gentleman dressed in some kind of a white jacket and cowboy hat, sunglasses. I didn't recognize the guy. He quickly identified that they had shot the mountain lion out of self-defense. We were satisfied by that explanation. There was indeed a dead carcass of a mountain lion, which we thought was dead. We examined the weapons license. Everything seemed fine. We were just about to turn around and leave when Deputy Winchester whispered to me, I think that's Al Sab, and he has an active warrant. So we turned our attention to the gentleman in the cowboy hat, attempted to ascertain his identity. He started to run back to a car. Actually, he did confirm his identity was Al Sab, but then he ran back to his car. High-speed pursuit was initiated north up the dirt road. We quickly turned around, went back south towards the scene of the initial stop. That's when the lead unit, Winchester, was crashed into by Mr. Chavez. From what I saw, it looked like he was off to the side of the road. He allowed Mr. Saab to pass, and then he suddenly and deliberately pulled his vehicle into the path of Deputy Winchester, disabling his car, resulting in a pretty serious accident that just completely destroyed his car. Winchester immediately got out, informed Mr. Chavez that he was being placed under arrest for obstruction, and searched him while I photographed the vehicle.
Okay. Do you know what was found in Mr. Chavez's vehicle?
Yeah, Deputy Winchester informed me that he found a bag of cocaine.
Okay. What happened after he found the baggie of cocaine and you were finished at the scene?
I was logging photographs of Deputy Winchester's vehicle when a mountain lion, I believe it was the very same one that was shot. We thought he was dead, but he apparently took revenge on Mr. Chavez and mauled him in spectacular fashion. We tried to get him paramedics. There was none available. I know that he had requested an attorney. There was none available. So I actually took him in my vehicle quickly down to Pillbox Medical Center to give him life-saving medical treatment. Unfortunately, he needed surgery emergently and needed to be placed in the ICU. He never regained consciousness, so I wasn't able to have any kind of a conversation with him like I usually do. Like we said, we had informed him while he was still conscious that he was being charged with obstruction. He was told that he had found a bag of cocaine, I believe. But after the ICU incident and the fact he didn't really get any legal representation, Deputy Winchester and I decided to charge him with just failure to yield.
All right. No more questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Shaw.
Absolutely.
This is really good. I love this.
Mr. Shepard, how are you?
Mr. Shaw, you
Good.
need to jump real quick. Thank you.
Good to see
All right.
you, Counselor. Pleasure as always.
I agree. The camera.
So,
I'm
a couple,
curious-
well, more than a couple, unfortunately. But you did state that you had a camera, correct?
Yes, I did have a camera.
Okay. When were you told that there was cocaine found within Mr. Chavez's vehicle?
Winchester told me, I think as soon as he had finished searching Mr. Chavez in his vehicle, while I was logging the damage to Winchester's vehicle.
And at any point in time, did Winchester ask that you take pictures of the physical evidence, the alleged physical evidence, rather?
Did he ask me to take pictures of it? No.
Correct. Did he indicate that he was not equipped to take pictures of any physical evidence?
The conversation never came up.
Did you take pictures of Mr. Chavez's vehicle?
I'd have to look at the memory. If I didn't enter it on the report, then I probably didn't. I'd have to defer to my report on that one. I don't remember.
Okay. At any point in time, Did Mr. Chavez indicate that he wanted you to take pictures of his vehicle?
Did Mr. Chavez indicate he wanted me to take pictures of his vehicle? No.
Correct. Within this case, given the circumstances, do you believe that the positioning of Mr. Chavez's vehicle is important?
I would probably say not, especially considering the position of his vehicle after an accident of considerable speed. Probably is not really that relevant.
Even though it would show the point of impact?
I mean, it moved a good distance from where it was, so I'm not sure that taking a photograph of the vehicle would prove where it was anyhow. I mean, I saw the accident, I saw the action, so I'd probably just say my own testimony would trump any photographs from the scene, but that's just my opinion on that.
Understood. So I'm going to sort of run through the same questions that I did with Winchester.
Sure.
So that being said, how was Mr. Chavez's demeanor when you first approached him?
As always, very pleasant, very amiable.
Okay. Did he give you consent to search his vehicle?
I don't believe we asked for consent to search his vehicle, but no.
Okay. And aside from the possession charge, was Mr. Chavez actually charged with any crime that would result in him being arrested?
He was informed right away that he's being placed under arrest for obstruction.
That wasn't my question. My
I'm sorry,
question was whether or not Mr. Chavez was actually charged with a misdemeanor or a felony unrelated to the possession charge.
You're asking if after everything was done, he ended up being charged with obstruction?
Any misdemeanor or felony.
He ended up being charged with failure to yield, which I'm not sure if that's a misdemeanor or a traffic infraction. I don't know where that falls in the statutes.
Okay. Had Mr. Chavez not have been placed in cuffs, and arrested for the possession charge, would he have been able to safely drive his vehicle away from the area?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained. Please rephrase your question.
I'll withdraw that question.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to go ahead and refer to police report 8312.
All right.
All right, it states here. Let me see. States, Deputy Winchester seized the baggie and placed it in the evidence locker for possible further lab testing. Was it you that had written that?
I wrote the report, yes.
Okay. Now here you specifically state it was placed in a locker for further lab testing. Would you happen to know if there were any was there miscommunication there? Was it placed for destruction or lab testing? Because Winchester states destruction.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't want to get too far into. I'm not sure if I would have to, or if I'm allowed to get too far into detail as to exactly what happens with that sort of evidence once we put it in the lockers. But ultimately, to answer your question, ultimately it is destroyed properly. But before that, sometimes there is some analytics that goes into it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And you had no involvement in the actual sort of custody of the physical evidence, correct?
I did not handle it. No.
Okay, understood. I'm sort of going to go into the same line of questioning as Winchester, although I do have a separate question. Were you and Winchester in separate vehicles?
We were.
Okay. Now, upon chasing the individual that you guys were pursuing, was there a crest at the top of the hill that would prevent Mr. Chavez from seeing you guys?
Objection, speculation. How would he know if Chavez can't see from it?
Mr. Shaw, your rebuttal?
I'll rephrase the question, Your Honor.
All right. We'll go ahead and sustain the objection.
Mr. Shepard, from your original position where Mr. Chavez was, according to you, placed under arrest, where the chase ended up going up the hill would you have been able to see the positioning of vehicles from where Mr. Chavez was?
I'm not really sure I'm understanding. Are you asking if I could see Mr.
Objection
Chavez's
confusing,
vehicle? Or...
Your Honor.
Yeah.
Mr. DeLaw, excuse me?
I said objection confusing?
Overruled. Mr. Shaw, could you explain that question to him one more time? Break it down, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Shepard, from the position that you were originally in, next to Mr. Chavez, that understood so far?
Right.
Would you have been able to see where you ended up in the chase after pursuing that individual from your original position?
So from the point where we started to the point where, so we went north and then we flipped around going south. From that point, could I see the original point?
Not from when you started heading south, but when you went over the crest.
That's more or less that we basically went up to the crest and then we turned around and started going south. So it's more or less the same spot. It's hard for me to say because when I was doing that turnaround, I wasn't exactly looking, to see if I could see where we started. I was focused on the pursuit. It's really hard for me to say that.
Gotcha. And could you... trying to figure out a way to word this question. The area that you guys were traveling on, in terms of traction, how would you... How do I word this? How would you rate that road in terms of traction, I guess?
Yeah, it's a dirt road.
Dirt road?
Yeah, it's not paved at all. So not great traction. It's better than driving out there on the grass. It's definitely a defined path for vehicles, but it's certainly not a paved road by any means.
Gotcha. Okay. And could you clarify on the positioning of Mr. Chavez's vehicle?
Yeah, so his vehicle was parked right more or less next to Mr. Saab's. Saab took off north up the dirt road. Both vehicles were parked on the west side of that road. When the vehicle flipped around and started going south, Mr. Chavez got into his vehicle and waited for Saab to pass going south, and then suddenly deliberately pulled into the path and stopped there. That's when Winchester crashed into him coming south, attempting to pursue.
And which side of Mr. Chavez's vehicle was struck?
Of Mr. Chavez's vehicle, I believe it would be the driver's side.
And what speed were you traveling?
Really hard to say. We had just flipped around going south again. We were getting up to speed. I would anticipate somewhere in the 60 or 70 mile an hour range.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be going downhill, correct?
I think you're right. I think it was going downhill.
Give me just a second here.
Y'all lost in house. Look who it is. 38 months.
My email just told me that this happened. Dear Lesson 3.
We were talking about you earlier today and your DJing skills.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mr. DeLaw or Miss West? Do you have any questions?
Questions.
On the redirect, thank you.
Yeah.
Please stay within the scope of Mr. Shaw.
Oh, I will. All right. Deputy Shepard, do you take photos of every car accident that you come across?
Every accident?
Every single one.
Probably not.
Already told Shaw
I usually do
requested
take photographs of an accident if I believe there's liability or if it was a crime.
Oh my God, that 3D model.
Do you take photos of every single baggie containing drugs that you come across in your line of duty?
If I'm charging somebody with possession of it, I usually do photograph it.
Okay. Do you need somebody's consent to search their property or their person while they are under arrest?
No.
Okay. What about if their car is being impounded?
If their car is being impounded, we have to, by protocol, search it and inventory it. That's so that when they get it back from the impound lot, they can't say, hey, my priceless artwork was in the trunk. You got to pay me back for that. We have to inventory it. Anything illegal that's found is going to be their responsibility, not the impound lot.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
All right, Senior Deputy Shepard, you may step down at this time. Just be advised that Mr. Shaw may call you as a witness, sir. Okay?
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. DeLaw, do you have any more witnesses?
In my opinion,
No, Your Honor.
it could still go
So
the
you're
other
arresting
way.
at this time.
Excuse me. Yes, Your Honor. The defense is arrested. Or sorry, the people are
But
arrested.
now it's Shaw's
Thank you very
turn.
much. Mr. Shaw.
Yes, I'd like to call Deputy Winchester to the stand.
All right, Deputy Winchester, will you please approach? And I'll remind you, sir, that you are still under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed, Mr. Shaw.
Yep. Deputy Winchester. What was Mr. Chavez
Yes.
arrested for?
He was originally placed under arrest for obstruction of justice.
That wasn't my question, Deputy. I asked what
That-
was he arrested for?
He was arrested for obstruction of justice and possession of cocaine.
Okay, all right. Let me just look here. See, I'm just going to go ahead and refer back to the police report 8312, where it states final charges: failure to yield to emergency vehicle alongside possession of cocaine. So was it obstruction of justice, or failure to yield to an emergency vehicle?
He was arrested for obstruction of justice and possession of cocaine, but the charges were reduced post-arrest. If that's what the question is.
Arrest? No, I asked what he was arrested for.
He was charged with failure to yield and possession of cocaine. He was arrested for obstruction of justice and possession
Winchester
of cocaine.
does make a point, though. I see where he's coming from. I don't think his
No further
statement's
questions.
wrong necessarily. But
Mr.
I'm not a
DeLaw,
lawyer.
Ms. West,
No, Your Honor.
or
No
Ms.
questions.
Dupre? No questions? All
Not
right,
at this time, Your Honor.
Deputy Winchester, you may step down at this time, sir. Thank you. Are you,
Yes, sir.
you all right there, sir?
wait, who's he though?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Winchester's
Got a
right or
itch?
Shaw is correct?
No itchy there?
It's been
That belt?
driving me up.
Radio?
New pant uniform, sir.
Okay.
Your Honor.
Yeah,
Mr.
that's.
Shaw, your next
I'm
witness,
thinking the
please.
same thing.
I'm all set.
Oh, fuck.
All right. So are you resting?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say something here. Just once in my courtroom, I would like an attorney to go, Your Honor, the people rest. Your Honor, the defense rests. Your Honor, the plaintiff rests. Just once.
I'll make it a
Oh,
first,
never
Your
rested
Honor.
this time.
The
Plaintiff
defense rests.
It doesn't count because you were prompted.
Your Honor, the gallery rests.
I feel like that's.
I
that's
rest.
all
Are both parties prepared to give their closing, or do you need a few moments?
me too.
As
A
usual?
few moments, Your Honor.
A few moments,
All
Your Honor.
right. I will allow a 5 to 10 minute recess. Court is in recess. All right, I'll go ahead and call this court back into session at this time.
He always does.
People prepared to give their closing.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the court, today we have heard all the evidence, including testimony from our own Los Santos' finest officers from the Blaine County Sheriff's Office. And this case has consisted of the fact that Mr. Shaw is seemingly accusing the deputies of planting coke on Mr. Chavez. Gasp. Is this the defense? Officers has every reason to search Mr.
Chat,
Chavez's
one if you think
person
we
and
won,
property.
two if you think we
The
lost.
search was legal, just, and
I
within
think
the
it's
confines of the
50-50.
United States Constitution. Mr. Chavez had illicit drugs on his property and needs to own up to his mistake. None of this would have ever happened if Mr. Chavez had simply let the officers do their jobs. Nino interfered with the police pursuit. If the man cannot see and acknowledge lights and sirens from an emergency vehicle, then he has no business being behind the wheel of another vehicle. Regardless, he still interfered, and it was then that officers placed him under arrest for obstruction of justice. While under arrest, he was unfortunately attacked by a mountain lion after officers had already searched his vehicle in person. Not to mention, it is standard practice for all police officers to search a vehicle before impounding it, as officers did. A person under arrest and a person who is getting a police impound as the car was at the moment placed in police custody does not need to consent to a search of their vehicle. The search was lawful and just. I trust the courts will rule in favor of the BCSO and see that they did everything to the book.
BSSO!
The road was described as a dirt road, and officers even said themselves that traction was limited due to the road conditions. If the road has little to no traction, it will require a decent amount of torque in the vehicle to get the vehicle itself moving from its original point. So with that being said, Mr. Chavez has to have put effort into moving his vehicle forward. Thus, the obstruction of justice, the original charge of obstruction of justice. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm done.
Mr. Shaw.
Yep.
Wait, we're not done with our closing. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh.
Then
I'm incredibly impressed.
Speak up, please. Mr. White, are you wanting
sir.
to add on to that closing statement?
Kind of like, re-add some things, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Thank you for your patience through this court. I have something to say. My officers did not do anything wrong. Let me tell you why. Because my officers responded and see somebody who was wanted. They pursue the wanted target. They did not lose eyes or nothing wrong. What happened? On the pursuit, Mr. Chavez parked his car in between after the suspect fled. That means Mr. Chavez did this willingly, knowing what he did. My officers, that's why, crashed into him because they could not swing away. What we learned is that Mr. Chavez might be maybe drunk, might be maybe, intoxicated. They don't know. Through this court, you have seen and you will learn. Oh, sorry, my friend. Scratch the last part. Basically, what we know is that our officers is doing their jobs, right? So what happened in this court, we have found out is that while doing their jobs, we have learned that Mr. Chavez parked his car there intentionally so that his friend, potentially friend, could get away. With that, my officers did the procedure by arresting Mr. Chavez. And then, of course, they found the coke on Mr. Chavez. Now, did the officers forget maybe to take pictures? Maybe they did. But do we believe that officers did right? Yes, we do believe so. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes, sorry, Your Honor. Apologize.
I love Saeed.
So, Your Honor, again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to hear this appeal. So we've heard today that my client was not charged with any misdemeanor or felony relating to anything other than the alleged contents found within the trunk of a vehicle that they had no legal reason to search. And as such, anything found within said trunk should be inadmissible as fruit of the poisonous tree, and the possession of cocaine charge should be dropped. Furthermore, the glaring issue within this case is the severe lack of physical evidence alongside the police claiming they originally had reason to search a vehicle and then voluntarily dropping it afterwards. Can we even verify the contents of this alleged baggie given nothing physical was admitted into evidence in this case? And consider this. Had Mr. Chavez not have been unlawfully detained and arrested, as the deputy stated, he would have had no reason whatsoever to have his vehicle towed. He could have gotten into his vehicle and driven it off himself. So in terms of using towing the vehicle as justification, again, had he not have been unlawfully detained, it never would have happened. Furthermore, Mr. Chavez had no idea that the chase was going to take a sudden, 180 turn and then return back to their original location. Again, it was dark. It was off-road. He had no knowledge whatsoever of Mr. Saab's intentions. Now, the issue with this is that we aren't really appealing an obstruction charge that requires specific elements to be proven because the charge was dropped, as they said, and is no longer up for discussion. However, they're also leveraging this drop charge to justify their illegal search of his vehicle. And if this is allowed, I see it becoming commonplace for officers to suddenly drop charges that give them the ability to legally search a vehicle moving forward, because then there's no real charge to dispute further on, and the police will always be able to reference that they had that ability during the time of arrest.
Whoa!
That being said, they should not be allowed to levy charges to justify their actions and then suddenly drop them and continue using that for their alleged justification for searches.
What the
Thank you.
fuck? I didn't even
Thank you,
see
Mr.
that
Shaw.
coming.
This time I will go ahead and place this court in recess while I go back. And when I reach a verdict, I will put out a state announcement. This court now in recess.
All rise. The Honorable Chief Judge is now about to walk in and deliberate his verdict.
Like when he got shot.
Deliberate his verdict?
Yes.
Coop's drunk.
Jack, are you all right?
Yes, I was rising.
Okay. Way to be smart. All right, can everyone hear me?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to break this down for everybody and how I
Rip.
reached this.
Rip!
So what we have is
We lost, boys.
we have an initial call from Mr. Chavez that he fired some shots at a quote-unquote murder kitty, which, by the way, is a protected species within the city, Mr. Chavez. Police show up. Then we have Mr. Saab comes up. Mr. Saab has a warrant out for his arrest. Mr. Saab starts to flee. And then we get into a tricky situation here, and it was brought up in court with the dirt road and slipping and sliding, and whether Mr. Chavez intentionally blocked the police from their apprehension of Mr. Saab. Mr. Chavez is then placed into handcuffs and arrested under the charge of obstruction for justice, which then gives the police the authority to search Mr. Chavez, search Mr. Chavez's vehicle, and have the vehicle impounded as well. During that time that Mr. Chavez is in handcuffs, he is then attacked again by said murder kitty, and then he is transported to Pillbox Medical, where he's treated for his wounds. And at this time, the police now, instead of charging him with obstruction of justice, they decide to drop that to a failure to yield to an emergency vehicle. It is a belief of this court that the officers acted within the scope of their legal guidelines that they follow here in the city on a daily basis. Therefore, I will be upholding the original conviction of possession of cocaine for Mr. Chavez. This court is dismissed.
Good job.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
All right, time to appeal.
We're appealing the appeal?
That's right.
You can't appeal the Chief Judge, unfortunately.
Mr. Shaw?
Hello.
Hell yeah, Kermit. Goddamn good stuff.
See you later.
Oh my god. Are you kidding?
You see that?
Yeah! Oh my god!
They got away with it.